So I wanted to welcome people to this very special session and to Arbor Week here at Speak for the Trees. Can people see my screen okay? Great, so I wanted to thank you for joining. We at Speak for the Trees Boston are celebrating trees all week through Arbor Week. And we're delighted for this event today with Professor Geniusz, who I will in a moment welcome formally. But before we do, I wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement here in Boston and throughout the land on which we currently reside, and acknowledge that trees are really important objects, but their celebration and their reverence did not begin in 1872 with a holiday called Arbor Day, but have a much longer history. And I want to acknowledge that by calling out Arbor Day is also a form of erasure of the history of the indigenous people here of this continent and their deep relationship with trees that goes back generations and generations. So this is an opportunity, especially today, and I want to thank Professor Geniusz for joining us today and giving this really important perspective around the role of trees and people and the important relationship between the two. Here in Boston, we want to acknowledge the sacred land and extend respect to the citizens of the nations that continue to reside on this land, their ancestral land, the Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and the Nipmuc people, who have resided here for over 500 generations, and also by extension to all indigenous people of this land here and around the world. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that by itself, this acknowledgement is insufficient, and it does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetuated against indigenous people, their land, and their water. So our work here at Speak for the Trees is committed in whatever small part we can to help dismantle the systems and heal the pain from this history. So I want to thank Wendy for being part of this, and everyone, I want to welcome you for this important work. And before I turn to Wendy, I have a couple of other people I have to thank here. So first, we have some generous sponsors who have helped us and are supporting our work all week and all year here in Boston to bring what we call tree equity to Boston. I want to just call out our corporate sponsors, including the Texas Investment Managers, WS Development, Eastern Bank, Essen, which is part of State Street Bank, Arborway Tree Care, John Hancock, and Cityside Subaru, as well as smaller local companies where you can shop and buy all sorts of great things and support their businesses, including Cambridge Naturals, Brookline Booksmith, and Newtonville Books. So with that, I want to thank us for joining today. I invite you to learn more about our work on our website, treeboston.org, and to learn more about the slate of events we have all week. If you go to treeboston.org/Arbor Week, yesterday we had a very wonderful talk by Judith Foster, Jeffrey Perrin, and Jody Ann Hansen that will be available later on our website after recording of that. We have tree giveaways all week. We have additional talks, so I hope you can join us. So with that, I welcome everyone. I want to give a special shout out. I think she showed up. Regan, are you in the audience?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Regan. Regan is our amazing intern who's pulled together this amazing week of events. She is a senior, a graduating senior. Hi, Regan. Over at Brandeis University, and this week is a labor of love and probably quite a bit of hair pulling to make everything work, but it's so far been amazing. So thank you, Regan. And I see also Victoria, and who's our development manager. Thank you, Victoria, for your commitment. So today's presentation, and you're going to have to correct me, Wendy, if I get this wrong. Nookomis Giizhik, my grandmother Cedar. And I just want to give a brief introduction to Wendy and how I discovered her work. I was walking down the streets of Brattleboro, Vermont, past one of my favorite bookstores, and this book was out on display. And I thought, well, I have to look at this. So I went inside and I asked about it, and they said, oh, that's the only copy is the display copy. And I said, I'll take it. And it's such a powerful book, and I encourage you all, and I can drop a link in later, to purchase it or to check it out from your local library. It is teachings by, I believe, your mother, Wendy, and your ancestors. And the title of the book is Plants Have So Much to Give Us, All We Have to Do Is Ask. And I know you also have another book as well. So I have a formal introduction here that I'll pull up for Wendy, and then I'll turn it over to you. So if you're joining us right now, if you would like to briefly just introduce yourselves in the chat window, that would be great. Who you are and where you're from. Now I'm nervous. I'm going to get all these words. I'm going to get them all wrong. In oh, you have to help me here.
Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe, or Ojibwe worldview, Nookomis Giizhik, or Grandmother Cedar, holds our world in balance. She is present at all our ceremonies and surrounds us our entire lives. One of her names, Nookomis, my grandmother. We're thrilled today to learn about this amazing being from our guest speaker, Professor Wendy Geniusz, and see the world through a new lens. And just real briefly, Dr. Wendy Makoons Geniusz is Professor of Ojibwe Language at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. But I discovered she's on her way to York University in a couple of weeks in Toronto, so congratulations. She is Métis and Cree with relatives at the Pas in Manitoba, and she was raised with Ojibwe language and culture in an urban native community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Makoons is the authoress and editor of several works on Ojibwe culture and language, including Our Knowledge is Not Primitive, Decolonizing Botanical Anishinaabe Teachings, and like I mentioned before, Plants Have So Much to Give Us, All We Have to Do Is Ask. And I'm going to put in a plug for her website. If you want to learn Ojibwe with Wendy, she has a website with fun learning materials, and I'll put that link in the chat right now. So without further ado, Wendy, I turn it to you. Thank you.
Ani buju hindinui maganadug Anishinaabe kwe indao makwa ndodem Milwaukee in Donjaba Makoons indigenous an dinwe maganang o pasquayat onjabawag an dash ema agama king. Pajigo mi great oma biajayig minawa dash apajigo nimin wendam oma ayayan je dajin daman anand bungi anand Anishinaabe gikinda so in ingajaganashim jigwa apajigo mi great bizindawig. It's in accordance with our protocols as Anishinaabe people, I introduce myself to you this way today. I'm Bear Clan. I have relatives at the PA in Manitoba, but I also have relatives from Agama King, Europe. And that's my dad's cool Polish last name in my name there. Yeah, and the short version of my Ojibwe name is Makoons. And I was raised in Milwaukee, as you heard. So I'm here to talk about Nookomis Giizhik, my grandmother Cedar. We'll get started on that. First of all, in our culture, you always say who you learn your teachings from. We actually give sort of an oral works cited page, if you want to think about it like that. So these are the people I first learned from as a child, and I'll be throwing in information that I learned from other people as we go along here. And I try to credit everybody, but there's just so many people now. So both of these women have passed on. The person on the left is Kiwade no Kwe Bun. She was my namesake. She gave me my Ojibwe name. And so I have an Ojibwe, not a Cree name, and that's why I speak Ojibwe, not Cree. The other person on the right is my mother, Mary Cedar Geniusz. She's also passed on. And I gave you some citations of their most well-known writings there. This talk on Nookomis Giizhik is really connected to them because I learned from them, but also because they were both university professors who talked about Nookomis Giizhik quite a bit. So I've even got slides in here. I'm trying to give photo credits that are, some of them are from their lectures I used to give. And I know that when my mother was ever asked to teach any kind of Anishinaabe knowledge, she always said Cedar had to come first. So she'd go and give talks that were, it was a one-time talk, but she had to talk about Cedar because it had to come first, assuming she'd give future talks on other plants and trees. I thought that during the talk here, I'd teach you Nookomis Giizhik Nagamun, the Cedar song. So that's why we're hitting pause, because it's a living song. Living being is an Adazokan. I can teach it to you like in person, but recording it just is very disrespectful, and I don't feel comfortable doing it, especially since we're living through a plague. So we'll keep coming back to this as we go throughout the presentation here. So a little bit about our philosophy, Anishinaabe in Dasoin, our Anishinaabe way of viewing the world. When we talk about the way creation happened, we talk about different waves of creation. And our first wave were some of these beings and others. There's first of all, there's the earth herself. And then there's also the beings that bring us weather, like the Inamaki, the thunder beings, the stones, the spirits of the water, our teaching spirits, including spirits that bring us the songs, like what we're singing today, also our sacred stories. All of these earth forces and these spirits, they're created first. The second wave of creation are the plants and the trees and the botanical beings. And at this point in the talk, my mom, Ann Key, always said the greeners and the non-greeners, because they were really close, more educated in botany than I am. And of course, some plants don't have chlorophyll. But Nookomis Giizhik, that being is connected to the second wave. This doesn't mean that every single plant and every single tree was here, you know, but their relatives were, and the idea that they were going to come was here second. The third group were the giguyag, the fish, the manadunsag, the bugs, the benashiag, the birds, the wesiag, the awakanag. So all the different animals and fish and birds and birds and bugs, they're all in that third group. And then finally, the Anishinaabe, which is a cool word because it's got so many translations. When you're talking about waves of creation, the Anishinaabe are all humankind, right? And then some other context, it's just indigenous people. Some is just Ojibwe people. It depends your context, but humans are the fourth wave. And my mom always had a picture of a baby in this slide when she'd talk about this, because she said we're the babies of the family. We're the last group created. In our philosophy, because we're the last group created, we are the most dependent on the other groups. This group, the first group that came, they lived here once before, and they certainly could live here again by themselves. The second group only needs that first group to live. That's how it was before, and it could be like that again. The third group, they need the second group. You know, animals need the plants and they need the earth forces to live, right? And we depend on all of them. So that's what makes us the most dependent. And we're all supposed to work together. We have promised Gichimanadu, Creator, that we would help each other and work together so that we could all survive on this planet. And if that first group, if those earth forces and those teaching spirits and those beings, if they were here by themselves again, they could survive. But our teachings say they would be sad because they'd miss us. And they also would not have fulfilled their promise to Gichimanadu because they wouldn't have, we would be extinct. We are all interconnected, and we're all dependent on each other for life in that way. I'm going to talk some more about that, but we're going to keep on with the Cedar song here. All right. So we'll start where we were. Well, Kate goes off when I think I didn't hit pause. Okay, well, you heard some of it on the recording. So our interactions with the rest of creation, we make offerings to all these beings. They're all considered living in our language too, where the stones and the earth forces are all considered living to us. We have to, whenever we want to gather or take a life from these other beings, we're supposed to be respectful, ask permission, and we're supposed to have a reciprocal relationship with them and remember our promise to Gitchimanadu that we'll live together in balance. It's a huge, huge part of our philosophy and hard to cover in a short time. So I hope we're understanding some of it at least. My namesake talked about Minopimadaziwin frequently and talked about interconnectedness frequently. And this is a quote from one of her, well, she said this in a bunch of classes, that she would explain what Minopimadaziwin was and the formula for how to live that. It's translated as the good life, life to the fullest, living well, something like that. But she said this is how that you achieve that and how you interact in a proper and respectful and the way we're supposed to interact with the rest of creation. So live, each of you, that you honor those that walked here before you. So live, that you honor those who walk beside you. So live, that you are remembered with honor by those who walk here after you. And she always stressed when giving that teaching that those people aren't just other humans. There are all these forms of life that we're supposed to think about the other forms of life. And when we make decisions, when we act. So just to introduce you to a little bit of this, because when we talk about Nookomis Giizhik, that's considered a living being. And this is a part of creation that comes way before humans come, related to that part of creation. And one of the groups that we're supposed to, think about, part of the other life we're supposed to think about when we make decisions. Just to know who we're talking about here. So Nookomis Giizhik, Nookomis means my grandmother. Giizhik means cedar. There are different names that this tree has. This is the one that I was taught as a child. This is the one that my namesake said when she was a child in the 1920s, that this is what people called this tree. Today, I haven't encountered other Ojibwe speakers who call this tree Nookomis. They call this tree Giizhik, Giizhikatig, Giizhikondug. Sometimes it's the boughs, but some people call the whole tree that. So you hear the Giizhik part, but you don't hear the Nookomis so much today. My mom and Key were convinced that that was because of the lumbering, that it was very hard to say I have to cut down my grandmother to feed my family, and that name changed at that time. That was what they taught when they give this presentation. But I was always taught to use this name, and it's in this old song that we're learning. Some people get confused in English because there's a red cedar. It's a juniper. It's the smell you have in a cedar chest and those little cedar eggs that you put in your clothes. It's the cedar closet smell. That is not Nookomis Giizhik. That is another tree. So you want to know that there's two kinds of juniper too. There's a prickier one and a less prickier one. So this is the one in my yard, okay? But that's not Nookomis Giizhik. It's a different tree. So make sure you're identifying the right tree. Beautiful foliage here to give you an example. Very flat foliage. The cones are very flat as well. In our story of how this tree came to us, and we don't tell, I really don't feel comfortable telling stories outside of winter. I was raised to say that you could if there was a need, but when you're in a pandemic, I worry about consequences. So I'm no longer telling stories outside of winter now. During the pandemic. But in our story of how Nookomis Giizhik came to be, she was a gift from Gitchimanadu creator, and the other forms of life asked for this gift to come to us because the humans were in such trouble. And this tree was pushed through the earth, pushed and pulled from the lower part of earth up to the world we're in here. And that the flat nature of this tree is because of that. So we'll do some more of the song here. I'm going to pause for real this time. Here we go. Wow, really sounding good. I can just tell, and I appreciate people's mouths moving or singing. Of course, Bimadaziwin, right? We just talked about that, so it's kind of close in the tree and the song. And we were having trouble pronouncing Anishinaabe earlier, but now you can sing it, so you can say it, right? And of course, Nookomis Giizhik is going to be in there soon. So this being, Nookomis Giizhik, is said to have come to us at a time when humans really needed help and they were very lost. And there's a lot of medicine in this tree. There's a lot of teaching connected to it. My mom and Key often talked about sacred cedar oil. Here's this is one of the slides from the slide presentation that this used to be, this lecture. This is one of Key's slides. And my mom always put it into, I digitized them like 20 years ago. But yeah, so I really thought it was a beautiful one. It should stay in the presentation. So there's a lot of medicines in this tree, but this is also one of the beings that we use to pray with. I don't think I've been at a ceremony where Nookomis Giizhik wasn't present. And at the modern day powwows, especially in the Anishinaabe communities, you often see Nookomis Giizhik, especially where the drums and the singers are. You often see an arbor with Nookomis Giizhik on the top. I remember a really cool powwow I was at in Thunder Bay one time where there was a little one in a bucket, like she still had her roots, like they were going to go plant her later, and she was right at Grand Entry. I thought that was really cool. So, and my mom was like, "Why didn't you get a picture for the PowerPoint?" But anyway, point is, this tree is very, very present, and we use the foliage in Kinnick, which is a mixture of herbs that we pray with. And the way I was taught, you always have to have Nookomis Giizhik and bearberry in that. You have to have those two beings for sure. So that story, we were lost because we didn't know how to live, but we also didn't know how to connect with people who could help us, with other beings on the planet and with other spirits. And this tree is our connection to these other beings. And because the tree came from another world, it's connection to all the worlds, that we're part of one world, but we're connected to these others through the tree. And in the growth pattern where it's said that this is balance, that I should have a better slide here, and I know that the old presentation had one, and I'm sorry I neglected here, but Nookomis Giizhik grows up and grows down, and it said that our teachings say that the branches go up and the roots go down and they mirror each other. And some people say that if a bird is in this branch, the opposite branch is going to have like a bunny or a mole or someone that nests down in the ground, and that it's a mirror image, the roots and the top. And if you look, and this is where we should have a better picture, at some of these trees, especially on like the north shore of Lake Superior, there's some beautiful Nookomis Giizhik, and they're growing on the rocks and the cliffs, and you can see the roots, you can see the tops, you can really see that symbol of balance, because this tree in the growth pattern shows us balance and a way that we're trying to live our lives. We're trying to be at a state of balance and be at that state of being able to be in equilibrium. And that's part of the medicines in there too. Our medicines it's really important that they're for physical healing, but also for spiritual healing. Getting to that balance is an important part of that. So I thought you might like this. My students don't know how to make, well, first of all, they don't understand our concept of tea is different than their concept. Then they don't know how to make tea. So anyway, I thought you'd enjoy this. First of all, in Ojibwe, you want to learn this. Okay, there's Anibish Shabu. Anibish Shabu, right? And Anibish is a leaf, and abu is a liquid. So literally to us, tea is liquid made from leaves. And we translate it as tea, but really there's just, it's not like black tea from the continent of Asia. There's many different kinds of teas we have. And for Nookomis Giizhik, if you're pregnant, don't do this, but anyone else, okay. You take some of the foliage. First of all, you're supposed to ask, we're supposed to ask permission. So you make an offering, or you say a prayer, or you sing this song I'm teaching you, right? And you ask Nookomis Giizhik for some of her foliage, and you pick it in a place that's not polluted, right? So maybe not in the city, right? And you take stick a little piece, and you boil some water. You let the water stand for 5 minutes, literally, and you have the cedar bough in a cup like this, something that can be hot, and you dump the boiled water over there, and then you leave it, but less than 5 minutes, because it's going to get bitter. And then you can drink it, and it's kind of neat to drink it with the cedar bough sticking out of it, because you look fun. There's some great internet pictures that the Growler magazine took of me. If you want to go Google those, you can see me drinking teas with pieces sticking out because I thought it was cute. Okay, but anyway, It's a really nice tea, a really nice tasting tea. It's a great, I'm telling you this because it's a great source of vitamin C. All the conifers are. This one just tastes really good, and we're in a pandemic, and you could probably use some vitamin C. So it's also when my mom and Key would lecture these in this classes, and we did this until the pandemic hit too. We used to serve the teas of the trees and plants we were teaching about, and I made it so I had iced tea versions, I had hot tea versions, I had honey, this whole thing. But then we couldn't do that with health regulations. But you're at home, go find Nookomis Giizhik and make some of this tea and try it. You can really learn how to identify this tree from the smell of the tea as well. And it'll help boost your immune system. It's also, of course, a really important medicine because of the balance aspect. Nookomis Giizhik is also connected to Noomishomis Giigwas. You can't, in my view, you can't talk about one without the other. So this is another quote. This one's from my mom's PowerPoint. She's paraphrasing Key's slideshow that didn't have writing in it. Okay, so if you should in your life become separated from the people, if you should be blown off course in your canoe, if you should be taken captive by an alien people, taken to a far place and there abandoned, if you should fall asleep during a night march and wake to find yourself alone, this is what you must do. Climb to the top of a high place, climb a tree or a tall hill and look over the countryside. If you can see the tall spires of Grandmother Cedar and the gleaming white bark of Grandfather Birch, relax. You are okay. You are with your relatives, and they will give you everything you need for life, and they will get you home again in this life or the next. This was a teaching that Key called Anishinaabe Kindergarten, and my mom started calling it too in her lectures. It's a teaching that our kids used to learn in our, we've many communities, they're not all the same, but in some communities, kids used to learn this. I don't like putting that in the past tense because they taught me this as a kid too. So I learned to recite it. And then I was told that you're supposed to spend the rest of the kids' childhood, there goes my light again, telling them how to do it. My light's going on and off. Okay, telling them how to do it. That you really, everything you need for survival is in these two trees. So let's identify the two. And then my sister, who's got photo credits throughout here, then we'll tell you a little bit about that. And it's a fun activity in class to figure out what do you need to live and then tell you how these two trees do it. We don't have time today, but it's a fun activity. So when I learned this word, Noomishomis Giigwas. Noomishomis Giigwas. And so my grandfather is Noomishomis. So there's Nookomis, my grandma, and Noomishomis, my grandfather. And Giigwas talks about the bark. It talks about the tree. You can use it for either one. There's also Giigwasinitig. There's different words that tree is known for. As with Nookomis Giizhik, I haven't encountered other elders besides Key that called this tree my grandfather, but it's certainly a really, really important tree to our culture and connected to really, really important spiritual beings. But to identify it, it's paper birch, white birch. It's the one that's peeling, but not peeling as much as yellow birch. So make sure you get the right one. Okay. And this is one of the old slides, the old slideshow. This is the mom and Key were like the nursery tree when they'd talk about this one. So these two trees have everything that we need to survive. They're said to surround our lives, to surround us our entire lives. The baby carriers, that there's a revitalization of bringing these back, but the baby carriers that we used to use and we're starting to use, the wood was Nookomis Giizhik and is in the present, people are revitalizing that. Inside the baby carrier is a little tray that's Noomishomis Giigwas. So right away from birth, the baby's surrounded by these two trees. Our old lodges that, again, we're revitalizing. Some of that we don't live in these, but for ceremonies, we're revitalizing that. The top part is traditionally Noomishomis Giigwas. There are mats around the bottom that are Nookomis Giizhik. This just goes on and on. There's just so many parts of our lives that these two are in. And then, of course, at our ceremonies, you see these two trees represented in different ways. Part of the fun lecture is what do you need to live? And then the students make a list. So water, So Nookomis Giizhik likes her feet in water. I don't mean the ones on manicured lawns, but if you go out into the woods, and this is a frozen river near Duluth, you'll find that the cedars that are naturally growing are growing near a water source. You can, I know it's fun that we're quoting the US Army field manual here, but the one way to get fire when you don't have it is a bow drill, and those items are made out of Nookomis Giizhik, can be made out of Nookomis Giizhik as well. And then, of course, the inner bark, you can make this wool out of it. You can have a cord, it catches the fire really well. And birch, right? Birch bark burns even wet. And they both burn wet. Birch burns better wet. But so there's you've got water and fire and shelter, and you can get food. We'll show you a little bit of that in a sec, out of these two trees as well. And you just go on like that. And when Key talked about this teaching of you having everything you needed in life from these two trees, she stressed it might not be the most comfortable, nicest time of your life, but you'll live, right? And that's really important. And of course, the Anishinaabe people, the spiritual connection of both of these beings is really, really, really important too. And I would think anyone that was lost and by themselves and needed hope, you know, having that connection would be very, very important to anybody, as well as the balance that Nookomis Giizhik brings to us. Another one of the old slides, all right? You can make a cord out of the inner bark of Nookomis Giizhik, and from that you can make a bowstring that you can pull. You can't use it forever, but a few times to get a deer, then you can get other items you're going to need. And also a fishing line, which of course won't work forever, but you can get some food initially. You can eat the inner bark of both too, but I don't want to give the idea that we're always eating inner bark of trees. It's just a starvation situation. And this is one of the mats I was telling you about, the bottom of the Waganogan, the wigwam, the conical one. Often had these mats. They were more durable than the cattail or the bulrush mats you may have heard about. And there's just so many different items just that you need around the house that you can make from the wigwas, from Nimishomais wigwas. People don't always realize it if they're not in the Great Lakes region, but the entire inside of the wigwasa is cedar, and the outside is Nimishomais wigwas. And that's where the teaching is, it gets you home again in this life or the next, because these two trees are present at our burials as well, even in our graves. Okay, somehow I didn't have an extra, I guess I did have an extra slide, I just didn't teach you the refrain yet. Yeah, so we're gonna pause and do this. I know we're running out of time here. Wow, we set you. We're great to visit Dawieg. We're so glad that you joined us. And if you noticed in the Cedar song, it's conjugated for I, but translated as we. Well, anyway, if you go see Our Knowledge Is Not Primitive, I wrote all about the translation. Have fun. Okay, I'd love to take questions.
Well, I wanted to first thank our speaker today. Thank you, Professor. Very beautiful and thought-provoking and inspiring. And I muted myself because I don't think you wanted me to sing, but I was, or you hear me sing, but I was singing. So thank you. And, you know, I think it's a small enough crowd here. And Wendy, if you wouldn't mind stopping screen share.
Yeah, my mouse is, there we go. Okay.
And that, well, we're a little more intimate now. So folks can, you know, feel comfortable either dropping questions in the chat or just speak as so you're moved.
Do you want to record this part?
I'm okay with it, but if others feel uncomfortable and want to put a chat in, a question in the chat, I can read it, and that will not become, I can leave it anonymous as well.
Yeah, that's not an issue. Yeah.
I see Teddy came on, and I don't know, Teddy, if you want to say something. There we go.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I'm Red Lake enrolled, but I live in Raytown, Missouri, outside of Kansas City. And I really enjoyed this. Miigwech. Miigwech.
Miigwech Gagin.
I'm wondering, I mean, I know your mother has written a book about this. I'm wondering if there are other trees that have valence, and maybe there's some favorites you have, or relationships. You spoke about the relationship between the people and the trees. And I'm wondering what's the relationship of the trees with each other that might be, or some other trees that might have other valences.
Well, they're all part of that second order of creation. So they're referred to as our elders, sometimes our elder brothers and elder sisters, sometimes as our elders and our grandparents. It kind of depends on the tree. They're one group and said to be able to communicate with each other. And I saw some cool research last week that they've done on mushrooms. They've got 50 different words they can identify mushrooms say to each other. And we've always said that, the plants and trees can communicate. So it's pretty cool that they've got this language they're discovering. I don't know much more about interactions between trees. There's stories, and one of them is in my mom's book, of the trees talking to each other and deciding who's going to take care of like a little bird and things like that. They've all got different talents, and they've all got different histories and different stories and different teachings. And they interact with us different ways. We're at the end of maple sugaring in northern Minnesota, and we're pretty much done down here in Wisconsin right now. And there's a whole bunch of teachings about Anishinaabe, the maple tree, of course. And I don't know if I have like a favorite, but I really like Giingwak, the white pine, just because they're so tall and they're so beautiful. But yeah.
Jarrell had a question. Jarrell, do you wanna?
No, I didn't have a question. I was saying thank you, but there is a question.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had said that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Beth had a question. So is there a seasonal component to cedar uses?
The only one I know about is that you can only, well, I guess I know a couple of things. It just depends on what the tree is doing. So if you're going to make cedar oil, you can only do that when the cones are oily. That's only a part of summer. You can't do it all the time. And if you're going to be peeling for the inner bark, you can, that's around the time you peel the weegwas, the birch bark. So it's like early summer. Otherwise, the sap has to be moving, right, to be able to peel. So those are the only, I mean, for those kind of things, what the tree's doing. But for praying with the tree, for making other medicines, unless it's something that has to be when the tree's doing it. No, I've never heard that. People use cedar oil every day, and people use that make the teas out of the foliage every day, and all sorts of things.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Could you talk more about how you use the cedar bark or the cedar inner bark for starvation food?
Yeah, I haven't, we made bread out of it one time, but that was like a whole other thing. It's the inner cambrium layer. It's on birch and cedar, and on the birch, I'm a little more familiar with it just because you peel the birch bark off and it pops. So there's this like spongy thing. So it's easier to get it in the the early summer off of both trees. But apparently, if you could get it off another time and you absolutely needed it, you would cook. You can't eat it raw. You would cook it like spaghetti, and it's very starchy. But I've been told that birch, people tap birch trees too. Birch is a little sweeter than cedar, so it tastes a little. People might like the taste of it more. But you're starving. You're eating whatever. So I've just heard you boil it up and you cook it and eat it like that. but it's the inner bark, not the outer. That's a good question about kinnick. When there's different ways, different communities have different recipes for what you put in kinnick. Ginnick gay is the Ojibwe word meaning mix, so it's many different herbs. The one I was taught, you know, it has to have Nookomis Giizhik and bearberry, but you don't, if you're going to smoke it, you don't want to have too many of the conifers. We put balsam in it too, and you don't want to have too many of those conifers because it gets really smoky for you. So it would be like a little amount. You want more of the other plants. But yeah, I know several pipe carriers, and I've certainly given them kinnick, and they've smoked it. Personally, I often make offerings. I have it in my hand and put it outside on clean ground, and I've burned it in a stone. That I was taught to burn in stones. Some people burn in shells as well, and I've seen people burn this and that. But it gets smoky if there's too much of the Nookomis Giizhik in there. Oh, cedar oil. I was told that you're supposed to put it on whenever you need the blessings of Grandmother Cedar. That's how Key described it. And you put it right here and right here. And you say, I'm thankful for the gift of life, and I unite myself with the ongoing, the people. That's what she always told her classes that. She was very public about that. She said that in one recording that she actually knew some students that were really going to do this every morning. It meant a lot to them. And one of them actually was planning on killing themselves. And when they did that, it stopped them from killing themselves because they were like, I'm thankful for something I'm going to do away with. So she always told that story too. And I have a bunch of her old class recordings, and she tells that story in there. I've been told that when babies used to be born, that they covered them in cedar oil. So you're surrounded with Grandmother Cedar right away. Key stressed, because she'd been at the birth of a lot of babies when she was a young person. She used to help out as a midwife, and she said that it made babies breathe rather than slapping them. She thought that was really important, that you came into the world breathing happy and breathing in grandmother rather than being slapped. And I've heard that the people cover the dead with them as well, with cedar oil. I don't know a lot of communities that are making it right now though, so it's an older thing from one area. I don't know how far it used to be.
Flower out of a balsam tree.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't cedar. It was balsam, wasn't it? I'm sorry, Dad. That's right. We ate the inner bark of the balsam. That's right. It wasn't the cedar. We ate the Christmas tree one year because we heard we could. It had nothing to do with old teachings. It was just we heard that you could. It's fun. Go cut down your own Christmas tree and grind up the inner bark, and it's a fun flower. But someone wanted me to say the cedar oil thing. You say you put some here on your life spot, and your inner eye and life spot. I think that's how it's, and you say I'm thankful for the gift of life, and I unite myself with the ongoing of the people. And I was only ever taught to say it in English. Sometimes I say it in Ojibwe anyway, but I was taught to say it in English. Minange. Yeah, that's good. Okay, it's white cedar, not red cedar, the juniper. And I think I put a slide up, but Thuya occidentalis, I think is how you, yeah. So make sure you're getting the right tree. The USDA has a grid identification site if you're having trouble. And a lot of the universities have Nookomis Giizhik have a cedar on their sites for arboretums identify this one a lot. So. If you have one in your yard and you think the tree's too big, well, cutting down a tree just because you think it's too big is disrespectful. Why would you do that? Think twice. Planting another doesn't help. You're killing a big tree. Rude.
I just was looking on Cambridge Naturals, our partner, to see if they sell cedar oil, and they don't, but you are able to find it
Yeah,
in
it's, I
other
mean,
places.
we have a whole thing. You have to make it. It's a whole like prayers and ceremony. There's other ingredients. It's not just that. And yeah, it wouldn't be the same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. But you can make the tea, drink the tea.
Yeah, yeah. What are the properties of it that make it good for canoes?
Oh, well, it's you can split it, and you have to split it so thin that you can bend it. So it's really thin. And I've seen videos of people doing it. You can like the board goes like this. I mean, it's that thin. And I think it's a beautiful example to give of, managing the land, and that in pre-contact times, and then when we still had access to enough land, we were doing things. You can't have a lot of knots if you're going to split like that. So you have to be pruning, you have to be making sure there's not too much shade around the tree, especially the birch. You're going to need to peel that tree. So there's a lot of land management that's going on to be able to make those canoes. My late grandfather-in-law was George Giizhik Sr., and he was from Mill Lake, and he was one of the last canoe makers in the area. They're revitalizing this now, but when he was alive, he was one of the last ones. And at the end of his life, we had trouble several times trying to make canoes with him because he didn't have access to land where cedar and birch were growing and could continue to maintain those trees long enough for them to live, to get big, to make the canoes out of. So that's been an issue for a while, since the 1970s, and he started having trouble finding them. So it's a really important thing to remember, land access and Indigenous peoples, and who has it and who doesn't, and then how do you continue teaching that skills to people if you don't have treaty rights? And if you have treaty rights, you still have rights to go and prune, right, and to burn undergrowth. And so there's a whole lot of other stuff that people don't think of when they think about access. No, you can't. I mean, that's just, cedar oil is a medicine. I think Key was talking about it in her classes to show people, in one way that this tree is part of ceremonies. But no, you can't buy it. You have to find someone who knows how to make it and ask them how to bring an offering and ask them to teach you, right? And it's a long process. It's not like you can just do it in an afternoon. So.
Yeah, sorry. The question, for those of you who aren't seeing the chat, is the preparation, the cedar oil preparation, is the protocol available anywhere?
Yeah, not that I know of.
Yeah. Well, maybe that will be our next session.
I don't know how to make it.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Geniusz. I mean, that was just a fantastic and inspirational, and I think really, for me at least, mind-opening understanding of the multifaceted ways to think about trees and our relationship with them.
Great.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for attending today. And I will be sending out the recording. It will be on our website afterwards. Wendy, you and I could talk about perhaps editing that part that was accidentally recorded. Maybe there's a way to do that. But I wanted to just close by thanking folks. And if you're interested in attending future Arbor Week events, our team has a whole set of events coming up. And I invite you to, if you're in Boston, to come in person, and if you're not, to come virtually. We have a couple of virtual events. So big round of applause once again to Professor and Dr. Geniusz, and good luck with your move across Yeah,
a border. Yes.
very exciting, and appreciate not only your knowledge, but your willingness to share it openly and honestly. And I know I'm going to take this with me in my own world, in my own life, and hopefully find ways to share it with others as well, because I think it's beautiful and important, and I think transformative. So thank you.
Be great.
Thank you all.